I'm just going to give a short introduction on the topic of innovation and urban investment. And the question basically is, why should cities become more innovative and what's required to do so? And for this presentation, I will draw on some of the recent research that ULI, Urban Land Institute, has been doing, both in the field of densification. So why should we densify? Should we densify? And if yes, how should we densify to make it successful? Building on views from our members, from experts all around the world, and also on case studies of 6 cities across Europe in different phases of population growth. We've been looking at Dresden, Istanbul, Stockholm, London, Warsaw, and Birmingham. We've done recently also work on the impact of technology and innovation on the real estate sector on a macro level. So looking at the demand of the innovation companies, the startups, in terms of what they want as a tenant. And also looking at it from the supply side, because they're not only a tenant, in many cases they also disrupt the real estate sector by either acting as a competitor, look at, for example, at Airbnb, or as a service provider to existing property owners, like Liquid Space, for example, also supporting property owners to kind of let that final small number of square meters in your office building. And finally, we've just recently published work at a conference in Brussels on competitive cities. We looked specifically at Brussels and Antwerp in that respect, but that it was building on a broader framework, which I'll also refer to in my presentation. So I would like to start with what are the major urban development trends? Big urbanization, reurbanization, and not only of people wanting to live in the cities, but also of businesses, tourists, capital. Investors are exclusively looking at cities to invest in, and even more a limited number of cities they want to invest in. So everything is basically coming back to the cities. And although we've already seen big shifts, we think those shifts will grow even more exponentially in the future. If you, for example, think about the potential impact of 3D printing, you can make a car next to a kindergarten, for example, and no one ever cares anymore. Well, that were the reasons before why innovation or why businesses had to go out of the cities, because they were polluting, disturbing. That will, well, I won't say it will be all gone, but we will see much less negative impacts of those developments in the future. And then specifically, why are businesses moving back to the city? Well, it's the demographics, lifestyle. People want to be in the cities. It's sustainability. People don't want to commute hours during the day, so business has to be close to where people live. Policy-driven and market incentives. Cities who want to grow the cities and want to attract businesses back into the city. Technology, I just mentioned 3D printing as an example, making it possible for cities to be in the city. And also because in the past, cost was a big issue also for businesses to move out. But now due to, for example, technology and more flexible working, businesses generally need less space than they needed before. So in that sense, you can say it's a cost saving, or it's a better, more efficient use of the space they have. And of course, it provides many more opportunities to collaborate, not only within a business, also between businesses. And of course, all these reasons also are valid for innovation, for the innovation economy and innovative companies. But there are a few more, and a few more are highlighted. Because innovation wants to be extremely close to talent. And that's in the cities. The younger generations want to live in the city, and the innovation companies need to be very close to that. There are even concepts who almost combine living and working. There's, for example, Second Home, which is a co-working place in London. Well, it's not called, called Second Home for a reason. It's a co-working space, but in the evening they lift up the kind of meeting table to the ceiling and they give the yoga classes there. So it's in Berlin, you have an example that's called SoundCloud, which is a big redevelopment, almost a guerrilla development, which was previously only offices. Now it's been hugely successful, and they're even offering residential on 6-month basis to the people working for the startups to get started, and on a very cheap rate they can rent an apartment or a room there. So it gets more integrated. Innovation needs to be very close to their workforce. Brand prestige, but also the test markets. Many startups have technological developments they need to test. And what is a better place to test it where you have many people available? In the city. And that's also what we see a lot. They use the place where they are as a test base. And of course the services are there, but that's not the only thing that counts, because one of the most important thing is that vibrant mixed-use environment. And that's something that in the past we have not been so used to. Well, long way back it was there, but kind of with the emergence of the car, basically we started to separate all the uses. We lived outside the city, we worked, depending on the sector, either inside the city in the suburbs or outside the city. We all know not so much in the Netherlands, more elsewhere, the suburban big shopping centers. So we've been doing much more out of the city than inside the city. And now it's coming all the way back, and we think the innovation sector is a very important driving force behind that. And often I get the question is, yeah, of course. But what's the impact for all of us? Because how much percentage is it in total of the total economy? Well, in essence, it's probably very small. And especially if you measure GDP contribution, because those businesses generally are very capital scarce, so there's not a lot to add to GDP. It's more the potential impact they might have in the future than what you actually measure at that moment. But what we now see happening is in terms of the tenant demands that they have, what you can see here, well-designed, adaptable workspaces, being in a vibrant mixed-use environment, high demands to technology and connectivity, public transport, flexibility in terms of lease contracts, but also to grow and to reduce space again. That's something that we see flowing through other real estate sectors as well, or other tenant sectors as well. If you now go to an office of a big bank or a fund manager or someone else, a creative company, all of them have open spaces where the canteen used to be used only in the lunch break. It's now used all day long as a meeting space. So that meeting space, space where people can talk and work together, is growing. So it is changing all of the office space. And not only that, it's also the mixing of uses in a city of having entertainment close to working, close to residential. And this is something that's really part of ULI's broader strategy. I just spoke about densification. And for us, densification is an extremely important theme. Following the urbanization, following the focus on sustainability, we need to get it right this time. We've tried densification in the past, and except for a few examples, it has never been really successful. If I would ask any of you, what do you think about densification? Probably the first thought you have, oh no, I don't want to live in such a high rise. And that's also the second misconception. It's not only about high rise. It's about densifying from where we are right now. Because generally, especially across Europe, our cities are not so dense. We have some dense areas in it, but on average, they're not so dense. Does any one of you know what the densest city in Europe is? Any guesses? Dick? You knew the answer, Rich. He's seen the presentation before. It's Paris, it's Paris. But Paris generally does not feel so dense because it's structurally 5-6 floors high with the Haussmann construction style. It has plenty of parks. That's dense. So it's not, and it's kind of fighting against the perception people have. We've done a lot of work so far only on the qualitative side, what good density is. Well, and within the city ring, the périphérique, Paris is a very good example. It's mixing of uses, mixing of income groups is a bit difficult in Paris at the moment. But ideally, it's mixing. So affordable housing is a key element that needs to be solved to get densification right. It's mixing of generations. It's sufficient green space. It's connectivity. It's having the opportunity to do whatever you want in that area, but also easy to get out of it. So it's back to the neighborhood idea, basically, from where we came from. Having the opportunity to go wherever you want to go through well-connected public transport. And this is basically, I'm telling you this because I'll come back to that in a minute. Because we feel this is a key success factor for cities to be able to attract innovation. Because you can focus on attracting innovative companies, but if you don't create the ecosystem around it, it will fail for sure. And how do you then develop innovation in cities? Well, there are many different examples. I've just listed a few. It's the one Seoul innovation districts. It's the different hubs across the city. In that sense, London is quite an interesting example, where you have Tech City, which basically now it's branded Tech City. But basically it started with nothing. It started with a few abandoned buildings right next to the city where no one wanted to live and no one wanted to work. And some creative people just started there because it was affordable, and London is generally not known as being very affordable, for them to be here, to be there, and with an additional advantage of being close to the city where the capital is. And then it grew and it grew and it grew. And the government and also the city government of London kind of got a sense of it and thought, wow, this is great. We need to brand this. So they started heavily investing in it to make it bigger. And to a certain extent, it has become the victim of its own success because it's not affordable anymore. And it's now actively managed and branded as Tech City. And now it's even moving out more to the east of London, where the former Olympic sites are. And that's the thing, it's how do you keep the constituents that make such a district successful? And how can you build from one district and flow into others? Now you see across London different smaller districts, one focused on the fashion designers, another more on creative design or on marketing, and all linked to each other. Because generally these people all want to be together because they can share and learn from each other. Well, and in addition to that, you've got the campuses, where you also in the US see them developing strongly. And of course also the individual sites. The co-working spaces I was just talking about are more and more the innovation kind of districts in a mini sense, with some of them being very strict on who they allow to become a member often, because you don't pay rent, you pay a membership, and you pay some additional for the services you use. And some of them, and they look really carefully on who they allow, what the mix is of sometimes bigger companies and smaller companies, just to get that mix right. Santander, for example, has brought their innovation team to Second Home in London. So they're not with their Santander colleagues. They've brought them to Second Home to sit with other startups and innovative companies because that's the atmosphere they need to be innovative. So what do we see? Based on the research I just showed you on the technology, we did 12 case studies across Europe and beyond that. And this just conceptually shows you where most of them are based. And then you see, except for a few, and you might recognize Media Park in Hilversum, who is far out. You probably can't read it, it's here. And there are a few others. You have the Oslo Cancer Cluster Innovation Park, which is a very interesting example, because Oslo has basically, a Norwegian government, have decided that they want to be the knowledge center about cancer research and innovation and development of medicine. And they've said that our main goal is to make the time from the first research up until the moment that the patient gets the medicine, we want to significantly reduce that. And to do that, they've brought everything together in the field of cancer research. The medicine companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the university, the academic hospital, all in one big building outside the city. And they have been even able to attract international experts to really come and live in Oslo to work in that cancer cluster park. So why is innovation then so important? I've already shared some of that, so you can already guess the direction we're going. And in that respect, I would like to talk a minute about what a competitive city is. Because in the end, it's about competition. And competition can be felt as a negative thing. Why should cities compete? But in the end, if we look at, well, maybe not us, but at least the younger generations, they look at it. Where is it nice to live? Where is it affordable? Where can I hang out? So whether or not you want it, you are being compared as a city to other cities. And competition is also very much a mindset. It's about having a strategy. It's about, do you want to have yourself compared to others? Do you want to work on improving what's available on offer for your citizens, for the people that work in your city? And if you ask an economist, I am an economist, but I try to look a bit broader than that, they say competition is about productivity. If you are productive enough, you will attract people. We don't think, and that may be true on the short term, but we don't think that's true anymore. Because people are about emotions. So it's much more, and we decide where we want to live. So it's also about coordination, branding of a city, promotion. It's about livability, a very important aspect. And of course, it's about sustainability. We developed that into a framework with 4 big categories, ranging from a few very strategic ones, like the governance framework and the competitive climate, to the agglomeration and the attractiveness to talent. Also more the softer side of the equation. And what we think is that besides, say, the governance framework and the competitive climate, which also to a certain extent are determined at the national level, so it's not all at the decision-making authority of the city, for example, the governance framework in some cases, or the legal and the tax frameworks. It's very national in many cases. But what do you see? Basically what it says is if you don't fix it on the left side with the blue, you'll never get it right on the right side. Because the basic thing is you need a vision to be able to execute the rest. And what you can see that is innovation is part of the box attractiveness to talent. Besides brand identity and human capital. And that's not coincidentally. Because we feel you cannot be successful about innovation if you can't attract the talent. So it's not about attracting the innovative companies, it's about attracting the talent. So it's a very different ball game than you might expect. And why is that innovation then so important for investors, for cities? Because in the end, that's where the money goes. And now that cities are more financially restricted, more and more funding has to come from private investors. The good news is that private investors are also extremely keen to invest in cities. So in the end, it can be a win-win story. But there are a number of conditions. And these are the results of our 2016 Emerging Trends in Real Estate survey that we published at the beginning of the year in collaboration with PwC. And I've pointed out those cities in red that are, if you can see it, that have a very strong focus on innovation. And you see Berlin is on the top of the list. And that's the second year. And we've also asked them, so last year it was the same, and we have also asked them not only for this year, but also for next year, and it's still #1 position. So it's really investors are looking at what's happening with the city. What's the policy behind it? How do people want to live there? Because they want a resilient investment. They do not just want to buy a building in a city with a nice tenant. They want to buy it in a city which has a strategy to remain successful for the future. And so we come to the final part. What's required to become innovative or even more innovative? I'm coming back to my same overview, the framework, and it's basically what I just said. You cannot be successful in attracting talent if you don't have a vision. Because if you talk to many of you are investors sitting here, what do you look at if you're a long-term investor? You want to know what the vision of the city is. You want to be sure that if you build something here today, tomorrow not a competitive building is arising there while you didn't discuss it. So you want to know the vision of the city, where do you want to develop? For the research that we did with the 6 case studies across Europe to look at the progress on densification and the successful densification they did, we developed a similar framework, basically. Because this is not rocket science. This applies for everyone. If you can't achieve your goals if you don't have a vision. But what we saw there is the cities that had the clearest vision and strategy were the most successful in the densification. Stockholm was the example that really stood out. They really managed to have a very clear strategy on which areas in the city they wanted to densify, how to make those accessible, and how to build communities around that. And all the entities within the city were collaborating on that. And even going further than that, because by now they had captured all the low-hanging fruit that was available. So now they were at the stage that it was becoming more complex, different ownerships, bigger redevelopment projects needed. They were also taking a look at the regional scale of the development. So beyond municipalities, but with that very strong vision that was really helping them a lot. And that's the same thing here. It needs a vision, first of all, also to bring those innovative companies in, to make that city livable, a pleasant place for people to stay and to live. They will come. But you now look, for example, Berlin is still on the top of the list for the investment rankings. But what's already started to happen, because also Berlin starts to slowly create an affordability problem. Many of the newer startups move to Lisbon at the moment, just because they feel it's a nice place, near the sea, nice weather. It's very open to innovation. They've really made that a key point for their economic development, and it's affordable. And that's what it's going that fast. If you're not able to maintain that strategy and kind of execute it, they will go elsewhere. And the businesses will go. So it's not only people are moving out, they're just going somewhere else. And that brings me basically to the last point. No, I didn't. I just wanted to share an example of how such an assessment would look in terms of the competitiveness. based on the framework I just showed you with the 4 categories, the 12 dimensions. And then you see, well, it's 25% basically how attractive are you to talent. It's basically 25% of the whole equation. So it's a very significant part. Coupling that to the governance and the vision and the strategy elements, those are the key elements for a city to become successful. Coming to the conclusion, well, as I said before, it's really about mindset and the appetite to kind of be competitive and to kind of develop yourself. That needs to be there first, because without that you don't get to a vision at all. Then it's about having the vision, having those bold ideas and basically the guts to execute them. Use the assets that the city has, and for each city that's different. For Rotterdam, it's the port, it's the industrial heritage there is, it's the location it has in the Netherlands. For every city it's different. It's also about what you want to be and how does that fit with the assets. And how can you use those existing assets to catalyze your development in the direction where you want to go. It's of course about transparency and incentivized governance. You need to be transparent to not only your inhabitants, but also potential investors, businesses, on what you're trying to achieve. And be fair on that. See it as a partnership and align interests, because otherwise it's not going to work. And finally, of course, it's about capability to execute, because a vision and a strategy is nice. If you can't execute, it doesn't help you a lot. And bold leadership. And bold leadership sounds very easy, but we don't see it very often these days. So maybe that's a nice way to close the presentation. Thank you very much.